High above the clouds, Richard Vance sat in his private jet, sipping coffee and scrolling through his tablet. He was one of the richest men in the country, used to power, comfort, and control. His jet was a symbol of that control, sleek, silver, and faster than any commercial plane in the sky. Everything about his life was perfect, or at least it looked that way from the outside. But that morning, something felt off. The hum of the engines wasn't as smooth as usual. The captain's voice came through the speaker, a little tense but calm. "Sir, we're experiencing a small technical issue. Nothing to worry about." Richard didn't like hearing the words technical issue. He hated problems, especially ones he couldn't fix with money or authority. He glanced out the window, endless clouds stretching below him, and felt a strange unease. A few minutes later, the jet shuddered. The coffee cup slid across the table. The lights flickered once, twice, then steadied. Richard's heart started to race. "And what's happening?" he demanded. The captain's voice came back, this time strained. "We've lost partial control of the stabilizer. We need to make an emergency landing." The calm tone was gone now, replaced by something cold and serious. Richard looked around the cabin, his assistants frozen, his bodyguard gripping the seat. One of the engines made a grinding sound, like metal tearing against metal. The smell of burning oil filled the air. For the first time in years, Richard felt small. The billionaire who had built cities, bought companies, and ordered people around like chess pieces could do nothing but sit there and trust a pilot. The plane dipped lower through heavy clouds. The city below came into view, glittering like a circuit board at night. "Brace for landing," the captain shouted. The jet hit the runway with a violent jolt, tires screeching, smoke trailing from under the wings. Richard's coffee cup shattered against the wall. The jet skidded for what felt like forever before finally stopping at the far end of a small regional airport. Silence followed, broken only by the ticking sound of cooling metal. Richard exhaled shakily. Realizing he'd been holding his breath, his heart pounded. But he tried to look composed as he stepped out. Cameras were already there. Somehow, like reporters smelled money and drama like sharks smelled blood. Within hours, headlines began spreading. "Billionaire's jet forced to land after system failure." Richard was furious. His expensive, state-of-the-art aircraft was now sitting in an open hangar, surrounded by engineers and mechanics who looked just as confused as he felt. The maintenance crew from the airport came first. Then a team from his own company flew in by helicopter. Everyone ran diagnostics. Opened panels, checked wiring, nothing made sense. Every test said the systems were fine. But when they tried to restart the jet, the same failure appeared again. He paced the hangar floor, barking orders. "I don't care what it costs, just fix it," he shouted. His assistant tried to calm him, but Richard snapped, "Do you know how many people are watching this? My competitors, investors, they'll all say I can't even keep a jet running." His voice echoed across the metal walls. The chief engineer, a man with 20 years of experience, wiped sweat from his forehead. "Sir, we've tried everything. The electrical system is looping. It's like the plane doesn't recognize its own commands." Richard glared at him. "So fix it." The man hesitated. "It's not that simple. We might need to replace an entire control unit. Maybe fly it to the main facility." Richard's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to hearing "not possible" outside the hangar. A small group of airport workers and curious locals gathered behind a chain-link fence. Among them was a thin, dark-skinned teenage girl named Aliyah. Her clothes were old, her shoes worn out. She carried a small backpack and an oil-stained notebook filled with sketches of engines and diagrams she'd drawn from memory. She had nowhere to go, nowhere to sleep that night. But when she saw the jet being towed into the hangar, she couldn't look away. To most people, it was just a rich man's broken toy, but to Aliyah, it was something beautiful, a machine she understood better than people. She listened to the sound of the failing turbines from afar, and noticed small details others missed: the uneven rhythm, the faint, high-pitched whine that came every few seconds. She scribbled a few notes, whispering to herself, "It's grounding out somewhere inside." The billionaire's team continued their struggle. Richard's patience was gone. He pulled out his phone, calling the manufacturer directly, demanding they send someone immediately. "I don't care if it's midnight, fly them here," he barked. The engineers kept working under the bright lights. Wires and tools scattered everywhere. Hours passed, and still, nothing worked. The jet sat lifeless like a sleeping giant. Richard finally slumped into a chair. Loosening his tie, he hated feeling helpless. He was a man who could buy islands, but at that moment, he couldn't even get back in the air. Outside the hangar, Aaliyah pressed her hand against the fence, eyes fixed on the jet. The night was cold, and her stomach growled, but her mind was racing. Every sound from inside the hangar sparked an idea. Every piece of metal seemed to speak to her. She didn't know yet that fate was already moving her closer to that broken plane. And inside, Richard didn't know that the person who would solve his problem, the one his million-dollar team couldn't fix, was standing just a few meters away in the dark, barefoot and invisible to the world. The morning after the emergency landing, the small airport was alive with noise and frustration. Mechanics argued in low voices. Reporters hovered outside the gates, and the Billionaire's grounded jet gleamed under the pale sunlight like a fallen titan. The smell of burnt oil still lingered in the air, but no one had answers. Richard Vance had spent the night in a luxury hotel nearby, pacing his suite, furious that his billion-dollar image was being dented by a technical glitch. Just beyond the hangars, hidden behind a line of metal containers, Aaliyah Brooks woke up to the rumble of passing vehicles. She rubbed her eyes and stretched her stiff limbs. Her blanket was nothing but an old jacket she'd found weeks ago. The cold air bit at her skin, but she didn't complain. She was used to it. She'd been living like this for months, eating from donation bins, washing at public restrooms, and sleeping where the night felt least dangerous. Aaliyah used to have a home, a family, and a dream 2 years ago. She was one of the brightest students at a city science academy, known for her love of machines and her quiet determination. Teachers called her a natural-born engineer. Her mother, a hospital cleaner, worked double shifts just to buy her daughter second-hand tools and books about jet engines. Aaliyah would stay up late, studying diagrams and watching videos about aerodynamics, dreaming that one day she'd design aircraft that could change the world. But then her mother fell sick. The hospital bills drained everything they had. After her mother's death, there was no rent money, no relatives who cared, and no school that wanted to wait while she figured out her life. The scholarship was gone, the home was gone, and the world forgot her. The only thing that stayed with her was her little oil-stained notebook, filled with her designs, her notes, her dreams. Now she wandered the airport grounds, drawn there by the noise, the smell, the machines. It was the only place where she felt connected to who she used to be. She would sit behind the fence and watch the planes land and take off, each one a reminder that somewhere out there, people were moving forward while she remained stuck on the ground. That morning, she noticed the silver jet again, the same one that had landed in chaos the night before. She heard the shouting from inside the hangar, men in expensive uniforms walking in and out, holding tablets and equipment. Her curiosity sparked instantly. She climbed up a small stack of crates to get a better view through the fence. Inside, she saw the same group of engineers gathered around open panels, their faces frustrated. Their gestures were frantic, pointing at screens, checking data. Aaliyah didn't understand everything they said, but she caught fragments. Stabilizer circuit, feedback loop, inconsistent voltage. She tilted her head, muttering under her breath. It's not voltage, it's grounding. Her fingers itched to touch the machine. She wanted to open it up, trace the wires, find the problem. That kind of thinking was instinctive for her. Machines made sense, they had logic. Order and purpose, unlike people, Aaliyah didn't know it. But her sharp mind was already seeing what the professionals had missed. She stayed there all morning, sketching what little she could see, making notes about the sound of the engines when they tried to start them. She could tell when they made a wrong adjustment just by the pitch of the turbines. It was like she and the jet were speaking the same language. By noon, one of the mechanics noticed her and shouted, "Hey, you can't be there." She quickly jumped down and disappeared behind the containers. Her heart pounded, but she smiled. She wasn't afraid of being chased away. She'd already seen enough. She knew what the problem might be later that day. She found a quiet spot behind the hangar where she could listen without being seen. She sat cross-legged on the ground, sketching again in her notebook. Her pencil was short, almost gone, but she kept writing on one page. She drew the jet's electrical map from memory, labeling each connection she'd overheard them mention. She circled one area and wrote next to it, "Stabilizer grounding, feedback error near control bypass." As the sun began to set, she heard heavy footsteps approaching. Richard Vance himself walked past the fence, talking angrily on the phone. His voice carried across the empty tarmac. They said it would be fixed in 2 hours and it's been 16. Do I have to do everything myself? Aaliyah froze, watching him. He looked powerful even in frustration. His suit was perfectly pressed, his shoes spotless. But his expression, that blend of pride and helpless anger, was something she recognized. She'd seen it in her own reflection once. When life refused to listen to her efforts, when Richard disappeared inside again, Aaliyah closed her notebook, her mind was made up. She couldn't just watch anymore. That jet was calling her not for fame or reward, but because she needed to prove to herself that she still had worth. She whispered softly, "If they can't fix it, maybe I can." As night fell, the hangar lights glowed like a beacon in the darkness. The workers were starting to leave, exhausted and defeated. Aaliyah waited until most of them were gone. She walked slowly toward the side entrance, her notebook in her hand, her heart thumping in her chest. She could see the jet now, its sleek silver body reflecting the lights. She didn't know what she was going to say or how anyone would react, but she knew she had to try. Something inside her refused to stay silent. The same determination that had once driven her to build model engines out of scrap metal was burning again. She stopped just outside the hangar door and took a deep breath. Her voice was small but steady as she whispered to herself, "I can help, I know I can." And with that, the homeless girl who had lost everything took her first step toward the jet that would change her life forever. The hangar was a battlefield of pride and frustration. Engineers in crisp uniforms moved around the Billionaire's jet like soldiers in a losing war. The air smelled of metal, burnt circuits, and sweat. Laptops flickered, tools clanked, and every few minutes someone cursed under their breath. Richard Vance stood at the center of it all, jaw tight, arms crossed, his expensive watch glinting under the harsh lights. He had built an empire from nothing. A man used to bending problems to his will, but now he faced something he couldn't control, a silent, stubborn machine. For Richard, the jet wasn't just a mode of travel. It was a symbol of power, efficiency, and perfection. Everything his life represented. Every minute it stayed grounded felt like an insult to his name. He glared at the cluster of engineers huddled near the open engine bay. "You've had all night," he said coldly. "Why is it still not fixed?" One of the engineers, a nervous-looking man with oil stains on his collar, stepped forward. "Sir, we've checked every system. The diagnostics show no fault, but the feedback circuits keep resetting. It's like the jet doesn't trust its own commands on. Machines don't have trust issues," Richard snapped. "They obey logic, so find the logic," his voice echoed sharply, drawing uneasy glances. No one dared to answer. Outside the hangar, Aaliyah watched through a small gap in the fence. Her heart pounded every time Richard's voice rose, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear. She had been listening for hours, memorizing their words, studying their actions. Every time they made a mistake, she whispered quietly to herself what they should have done instead. "You're looping the same circuit. You need to check the stabilizer feedback," she murmured, tracing invisible lines in the air. Her stomach growled from hunger, but she ignored it. All she could think about was the plane, the noise it made when it tried to start, the flicker of lights when they connected the systems. She understood its rhythm, the way a musician understands music. Inside, Richard turned to the chief engineer, a gray-haired man named Douglas. "You built this plane for perfection, didn't you?" he said bitterly. "And now it's a pile of junk." Douglas swallowed hard. "Sir, it's not junk. It's one of the most advanced models in existence. The problem is small. It's hiding in the system somewhere. It could take days to trace manually. Days." Richard's tone dripped with disbelief. "Do you know what a day costs me?" His assistant, a young woman named Clara, tried to calm him. "Sir, maybe we should fly in a replacement team from headquarters." Richard cut her off sharply. "No, I already have the best people here if they can't do it." "No one can." The arrogance in his voice was like a wall. Strong, polished and unbreakable. No one dared challenge him, not even when they knew he was wrong. Aaliyah pressed her forehead against the cold metal fence. Her fingers clutched her notebook so tightly that her knuckles turned white. She could almost see the faulty section in her mind. Every time the engineers touched a certain wire bundle, the jet's instruments flickered. It was obvious to her, a feedback loop caused by a misplaced grounding line. She wanted to scream it out, to tell them what they were missing, but she didn't. She was a homeless girl covered in dirt, who hadn't eaten properly in days, who would listen to her. No one, she thought. Not in this world where money decided who had a voice. Then she saw Richard again, pacing near the jet, shouting into his phone, "Get me someone competent, I don't care what it costs." The words stung her, not because they were aimed at her, but because she once dreamed of being that competent someone, the person people called when no one else could fix it. A gust of wind blew through the hangar, carrying a mix of dust and oil fumes. The engineers looked defeated now. Some were sitting on toolboxes, others checking the same readings again and again, hoping something would change. The hum of frustration filled the air, and then for a brief moment Aaliyah imagined walking in there. Imagined saying the words she'd been whispering for hours. "I think I know what's wrong." The thought scared her, but it also filled her with an unfamiliar energy. Courage. The kind she hadn't felt since her mother was alive. Inside, Douglas turned to Richard one last time. "Sir, we've done everything. If we push further, we risk damaging the control core." Richard rubbed his temples. "You're telling me that my $80 million jet is dead?" Douglas sighed. "Not dead, sir, just asleep until someone finds the right wire to wake it up." The irony made Aaliyah smile faintly behind the fence. She whispered, "Then let me wake it." Her voice was barely audible, lost under the sound of tools clattering. As the day wore on, reporters began gathering outside, curious about the billionaire's stranded jet. A few took photos from a distance, calling it the most expensive mystery in aviation. Richard hated it. He ordered the hangar doors closed, blocking the view from outside, but Aaliyah stayed put, pressing her ear to the metal. Listening to every sound, the sun was starting to set, painting the sky orange and gold. The hangar lights flickered on one by one, casting long shadows across the ground. Aaliyah could hear the frustration reaching its peak. Someone threw a wrench in anger. Someone else swore loudly. She took a deep breath. Her hands trembled, but she whispered to herself again, "They're looking too hard in the wrong place." She looked at her notebook, flipping to the last page where she had drawn a crude sketch of the engine layout. Her pencil scratched softly as she wrote one more note. "Grounding wire near stabilizer feed. Secondary line hidden behind main circuit. Check there first." She stared at the sketch, then at the glowing hangar. Her heart pounded faster. Every instinct told her to stay out, to remain invisible. But another voice, and quiet, persistent, and strong, told her this was her moment. Inside, Richard's voice echoed again, tired now, almost defeated. Maybe this thing really is unfixable. And somewhere in the dark, behind the fence, Aaliyah whispered back, "Nothing is unfixable, not if you listen closely enough." She didn't know it yet, but those quiet words were the beginning of something extraordinary. The moment when a forgotten girl would step out of the shadows and change everything. The hangar was almost silent now. The once busy engineers had either gone home or sat quietly, defeated by exhaustion. The billionaire's jet stood motionless under the floodlights, its silver body gleaming like a sleeping animal that refused to wake. Richard Vance leaned against a table, his jacket off, his sleeves rolled up, and his patience completely gone. He had yelled, ordered, and even threatened. But nothing had changed. The best minds money could buy had failed him. Outside, the night had turned cold and still. The airport's far corner was empty, except for one figure. Aaliyah. She crouched near the hangar's side door, clutching her old notebook to her chest. Her heart was racing. She could hear the faint hum of machinery inside, and something deep inside her told her she didn't belong here. But another voice whispered louder, "You know what's wrong. You can help." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling, then pushed the door open just enough to slip through. The warmth and light hit her face. The noise of the hangar echoed in her ears, the clinking of tools, the soft murmur of frustrated voices. She looked small and out of place, wearing torn jeans, an oversized hoodie, and worn-out sneakers. Her hair was messy, her face smudged with dirt. A few mechanics turned their heads, confused. "Hey, you can't be here," one of them said sharply. But before they could grab her, Aaliyah lifted her chin and said almost in a whisper, "I think I know what's wrong with the jet." The words hung in the air like an electric charge. The men froze, staring at her as if she had spoken another language. Richard turned slowly from his desk, his expression caught between irritation and disbelief. "What did you just say?" Aaliyah swallowed hard, her voice shaking but clear. "I've been listening, I heard everything. The stabilizer feedback loop. It's grounding out behind the main circuit. You're checking the wrong line. A few engineers chuckled under their breath. One muttered, "She's crazy," another said, "Get her out of here before she breaks something." But Richard didn't laugh. He studied her, the trembling hands, the dirt-streaked face, the wide, determined eyes. She was young, maybe 17, and clearly not part of any crew. Yet there was something in her voice, not arrogance, but quiet certainty. "Who are you?" he asked, his tone sharp but curious. "My name's Aaliyah," she said, hugging her notebook tighter. "I used to study engineering, before—" She trailed off. "Before life got hard." Richard raised an eyebrow. "And you think you can fix a jet that my team of experts couldn't?" She nodded slowly. "I don't think I know." The room filled with whispers. Some engineers smirked, one even rolled his eyes. "Sir, this is ridiculous," Douglas, the chief engineer, stepped forward. "Mr. Vance, she's just a kid. Let's not waste time." But Richard held up a hand. "No, wait." His pride fought with his curiosity. He didn't believe her, not really. But he had nothing to lose. Every other option had failed. Maybe he just wanted to prove her wrong and be done with it. He crossed his arms. "Fine," he said coolly. "You have 5 minutes. Show me what you think you know." The room went silent. The engineers exchanged confused looks. Some laughed quietly, convinced this was going to be entertaining. Aaliyah's stomach turned with fear, but she nodded, clutching her notebook like armor. Douglas sighed and handed her a small flashlight. "Go ahead then, genius," he said sarcastically. Aaliyah stepped closer to the jet, her footsteps soft against the metal floor. For a moment, everything else disappeared in the noise. The people, even her fear. She ran her fingers along the smooth body of the plane, whispering to herself, "Machines are honest. They don't lie." She crouched near the open engine bay, shining the flashlight into the tangled maze of wires and panels. Her movements were slow but deliberate. Her eyes scanned every connection. She traced a wire with her fingertip, then stopped. "There," she murmured almost to herself. She leaned closer, squinting at a small black cable half hidden behind a bundle of others. It had a faint burn mark near the base, something so subtle that no one else had noticed. "This wire's shorting the feedback circuit," she said louder now. "That's why the system keeps resetting. It's grounding out before it reaches the stabilizer." Douglas frowned. "That can't be. We ran a full diagnostic." "Diagnostics can't see what's behind the main cluster," Aaliyah replied gently. "You have to feel it." She carefully pulled out the thin wire with the tip of a screwdriver, revealing the scorched metal beneath the insulation. "It's this," she said softly. "You fix this. The jet wakes up." The engineers leaned closer, suddenly quiet. One of them ran a scanner, and the reading blinked red. A grounding error exactly where she said. For a moment, no one spoke. Richard stared, eyes narrowing. "How did you know that?" Aaliyah shrugged, her voice trembling now that the rush was fading. "I listened. The engines tell you everything if you pay attention." A small silence filled the hangar, thick and strange. Douglas quickly made the repair under her direction. A simple connection using a replacement wire and a bit of insulation. Then he nodded toward the control board. "Power it up." Richard hesitated, then motioned for the technician to start the sequence. The lights flickered on, one by one. The jet's hum returned, low and steady like a heartbeat. Then the control screen flashed green, system stable. The room erupted into gasps. Someone laughed in disbelief. Another clapped his hands. Aaliyah stepped back, her face lit by the glow of the revived jet. She couldn't help but smile, not a proud smile, but a relieved one. Richard stared at her, silent. His arrogance had cracked, replaced by something else, wonder, maybe even respect. He walked up to her slowly. "You really did it," he said quietly. Aaliyah nodded. "I told you." It just needed someone to listen. For the first time that night, Richard Vance didn't have a response. The girl who had walked in from the dark had done what his wealth, his team and his machines couldn't. She had listened. And though she didn't know it yet, that single moment, her whisper, her courage, would change both of their lives forever. For the first time in almost 2 days, the hangar didn't sound like chaos. Instead of angry voices and clattering tools, there was only the soft hum of the jet. Alive again under the golden glow of the overhead lights, the sound was smooth, steady, and perfect. A heartbeat returning after being flatlined, Aaliyah stood a few feet away, her hands still trembling from the rush of what she had just done. Around her, the same men who had laughed at her only an hour ago now stared in stunned silence. The chief engineer, Douglas, still couldn't believe his readings. He kept checking the system logs again and again, muttering to himself, "It's holding stable." "It's actually holding stable." Richard Vance stood in front of the plane, his expression unreadable. He wasn't a man used to being surprised. He lived in a world where he controlled everything: people, deals, outcomes, and now this girl, barefoot and homeless, had walked in and undone his entire sense of order. He had expected her to fail, to confirm what he already believed about people like her. Instead, she had done the impossible. "Who taught you to do that?" he finally asked, his voice quieter now, less sharp. Aaliyah looked at him nervously, unsure if he was angry or impressed. "My mom," she said softly. "She worked at a hospital, but at night she fixed old radios and engines. She said machines are like people. They just need someone patient enough to listen." Richard blinked, taken aback by the simplicity of her answer. For a moment he didn't know what to say. Everyone else in the hangar seemed to fade into the background. He saw not just a girl, but a story he couldn't quite understand, one that didn't fit into his world of numbers and contracts. Douglas broke the silence first. "Sir, I'll finalize the repairs, but the system's perfect now," he said, almost reluctantly, as if admitting defeat. She was right. Those 3 words hung heavy in the air. The billionaire's top engineer admitting that a girl from the street had been right all along. Richard turned back to Aaliyah. "You really shouldn't have been in here," he said, but his tone was softer now. "You could have gotten hurt." Aaliyah smiled a little. "I've been hurt worse, sir," she said honestly. This felt better. The engineers exchanged looks, unsure whether to laugh or stay silent. Richard exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. He didn't like being humbled, but he couldn't deny what he had seen. He finally nodded toward the jet. "You just saved me millions of dollars," he said. "And possibly my reputation." Aaliyah shrugged shyly. "I wasn't trying to save anyone. I just wanted to fix it." Her honesty hit him harder than any compliment could. There was no ego in her words, just a quiet truth. Reporters outside had started catching wind that something had changed. Cameras flashed through the hangar windows. Someone must have leaked that the jet was running again. Richard's assistant hurried over. "Sir, the press wants a statement." "Not yet," he said sharply. He looked back at Aaliyah. "What do you want, kid?" She hesitated, clutching her notebook tighter. "Nothing," she said after a pause. "I just wanted a chance to try." That answer stopped him cold. People didn't usually talk to Richard Vance like that. They wanted money, power, opportunities, not a chance to try. He looked at her more closely now, noticing the holes in her shoes, the way her hair was tied back with a piece of string, the exhaustion in her eyes, and yet beneath all that, there was fire. The kind that couldn't be bought or taught. He gestured toward a nearby table. "Sit," he said. She looked confused. "Sir?" "Sit," he repeated. "You look like you haven't eaten in days." Someone brought her a plate from the break room, just a sandwich and a bottle of water, but Aaliyah's hands shook as she took it. "Thank you," she said quietly. For a girl who hadn't heard kindness in a long time, the simple gesture meant more than he realized. Richard leaned back against the table, watching her eat. "You said you studied engineering?" he asked. "I was supposed to," she said between bites. "I got into a technical school. I loved it. I used to build things from scrap. Little engines, turbines, even a model drone once, but then my mom got sick, and everything fell apart." Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced a smile. "After she died, I couldn't afford rent or tuition, so I ended up here." Richard didn't respond right away. He looked down, the noise of the hangar fading again. He was a man who had grown up poor too, but he had been given chances. Investors, mentors, doors that opened. This girl had been given none, and yet she had done more with nothing than most of his engineers had done with everything. He finally spoke. "You're wasted out here." "You shouldn't be sleeping near hangars," Aaliyah smiled faintly. "It's quiet and I can still hear the planes. It reminds me what I want to do." Her words struck something in him, a long-forgotten feeling, the hunger that had once driven him when he was her age. Before success turned him hard, Clara, his assistant, walked over with her tablet. "Sir, the media is still outside," she said. "They're asking what happened." Richard's eyes flicked toward the doors, then back to Aaliyah. "Tell them we had an unexpected consultant," he said with a small smirk. Clara blinked. "Sir?" You heard me, he said. A consultant. Aaliyah looked up, surprised. Consultant? She repeated. Richard gave her a half smile. That's what people like me call someone who saves the day. Douglas looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He knew better than to argue when Richard had that tone. As the sound of reporters grew louder outside, Aaliyah finished her sandwich and stood up. I should go, she said quietly. You've got your jet working now. Richard hesitated, something in him not wanting to let her walk away. Wait, he said, where are you staying? She glanced toward the hangar door. Nowhere, really, she admitted. But it's okay. I manage. Richard didn't speak for a moment. He looked at the girl, the genius who had fixed his jet with nothing but intuition, determination and an old notebook, and realized something. Maybe the jet wasn't the only thing that had been broken. Maybe he had been too. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card and handed it to her. If you ever want to build something again, he said, call this number. Aaliyah looked at the card as if it were made of gold. You mean it? Richard nodded once. Completely, she smiled. A real smile this time, bright and full of something the hangar hadn't seen all day. Hope. And for the first time, the billionaire and the homeless girl shared something neither expected. Respect, born not from wealth or power, but from the simple act of fixing what others said couldn't be fixed. Not yet, he said sharply. He looked back at Aaliyah. What do you want, kid? She hesitated, clutching her notebook tighter. Nothing, she said after a pause. I just wanted a chance to try. That answer stopped him cold. People didn't usually talk to Richard Vance like that. They wanted money, power, opportunities, not a chance to try. He looked at her more closely now, noticing the holes in her shoes, the way her hair was tied back with a piece of string, the exhaustion in her eyes, and yet beneath all that, there was fire. The kind that couldn't be bought or taught. He gestured toward a nearby table. Sit, he said. She looked confused. Sir? Sit, he repeated. You look like you haven't eaten in days. Someone brought her a plate from the break room, just a sandwich and a bottle of water, but Aaliyah's hands shook as she took it. Thank you, she said quietly. For a girl who hadn't heard kindness in a long time, the simple gesture meant more than he realized. Richard leaned back against the table, watching her eat. You said you studied engineering? He asked. I was supposed to, she said between bites. I got into a technical school. I loved it. I used to build things from scrap. Little engines, turbines, even a model drone once, but then my mom got sick, and everything fell apart. Her voice cracked slightly, but she forced a smile. After she died, I couldn't afford rent or tuition, so I ended up here. Richard didn't respond right away. He looked down, the noise of the hangar fading again. He was a man who had grown up poor too, but he had been given chances. Investors, mentors, doors that opened. This girl had been given none, and yet she had done more with nothing than most of his engineers had done with everything. He finally spoke. You're wasted out here. You shouldn't be sleeping near hangars. Aaliyah smiled faintly. It's quiet and I can still hear the planes. It reminds me what I want to do. Her words struck something in him. A long-forgotten feeling. The hunger that had once driven him when he was her age. Before success turned him hard, Clara, his assistant, walked over with her tablet. Sir, the media is still outside, she said. They're asking what happened. Richard's eyes flicked toward the doors, then back to Aaliyah. Tell them we had an unexpected consultant, he said with a small smirk. Clara blinked. Sir? You heard me, he said. A consultant. Aaliyah looked up, surprised. Consultant? She repeated. Richard gave her a half smile. That's what people like me call someone who saves the day. Douglas looked uncomfortable but said nothing. He knew better than to argue when Richard had that tone. As the sound of reporters grew louder outside, Aaliyah finished her sandwich and stood up. I should go, she said quietly. You've got your jet working now. Richard hesitated, something in him not wanting to let her walk away. Wait, he said, where are you staying? She glanced toward the hangar door. Nowhere, really, she admitted. But it's okay. I manage. Richard didn't speak for a moment. He looked at the girl, the genius who had fixed his jet with nothing but intuition, determination and an old notebook, and realized something. Maybe the jet wasn't the only thing that had been broken. Maybe he had been too. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a business card and handed it to her. If you ever want to build something again, he said, Call this number. Aaliyah looked at the card as if it were made of gold. You mean it? Richard nodded once, completely. She smiled. A real smile this time, bright and full of something the hanger hadn't seen all day. Hope. And for the first time, the billionaire and the homeless girl shared something neither expected. Respect, born not from wealth or power, but from the simple act of fixing what others said couldn't be fixed. The next few days moved faster than Aaliyah could have ever imagined. One moment, she was sleeping near the airport fence with nothing but her old blanket, and the next she was sitting inside a luxury car, being driven to a 5-star hotel arranged by Richard Vance's foundation. It all felt like a dream she wasn't sure she belonged in. When she walked into the hotel lobby for the first time, her reflection in the glass startled her. Clean clothes, new sneakers, a proper backpack, gifts from Richard's assistant Clara, who had insisted she take them. The receptionist smiled politely as Aaliyah checked in, but she could feel the stares of other guests. She wasn't used to soft carpets, chandeliers, or the faint scent of expensive perfume. Upstairs in her room, she stood by the window for a long time, watching the city lights flicker like stars. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. Don't ever let the world tell you you're small. Baby, even when they try to make you feel it. For the first time, Aaliyah whispered back, I won't, Mama. The following morning, Clara arrived to take her to the Vance Foundation headquarters. The building was all glass and steel, towering over the city like something out of a dream. Inside, she met scientists, engineers, and students from around the world. But even here, Aaliyah noticed the subtle looks, curiosity, disbelief, a little doubt. This is her? One of the senior engineers whispered as she passed. The girl who fixed the jet. Another replied under his breath, She doesn't even look old enough to drive. Aaliyah heard every word, but she didn't flinch. She had faced worse, hunger, cold, nights with no roof. A few skeptical looks couldn't break her. Richard met her on the top floor, where his office overlooked the entire city. You ready to start? He asked, his usual calm confidence masking something deeper. Pride, perhaps, or hope. She nodded. More than ready. He smiled. Good. You'll be working with Dr. Lin, one of our best. She's designing a new hybrid propulsion system. I told her you have an eye for problems others miss, Dr. Lin. A precise woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a calm voice extended her hand. Welcome, Aaliyah. I've read about your work, impressive for someone with no formal training. Thank you, ma'am, Aaliyah said, trying not to sound nervous. That first day was tough. The lab was filled with complex equipment she'd never seen before. Equations covered every board, and conversations moved too fast for her to follow. But instead of giving up, she watched my every movement, every test, every failure. She took notes quietly in her small notebook. Just as she always had during lunch, some interns laughed about a news article calling her the miracle mechanic. One of them said, Bet she just got lucky, another added. Vance probably made it up for publicity. Aaliyah said nothing. But that night, she stayed in the lab long after everyone had gone home. She studied the diagrams again and again, tracing the patterns of airflow, studying the engine's modular design, and somewhere around midnight, she noticed something, a slight misalignment in the fuel intake ratio, so tiny that even the computers hadn't flagged it. The next morning, when Dr. Lin came in, Aaliyah showed her the notes. If you shift the valve timing by 0.2 milliseconds, the combustion cycle would stabilize, she explained. Dr. Lin blinked. How did you catch that? It just didn't sound right, Aaliyah said with a small smile. Dr. Lin tested the adjustment, and when the engine prototype roared to life smoother than ever, she looked at Aaliyah with something new in her eyes. Respect. Well, she said softly, it seems luck has nothing to do with it. Word spread quickly through the foundation. The homeless girl had done it again, this time not by accident but by skill. Even the skeptical engineers couldn't deny it now. That afternoon, Richard visited the lab. You just improved a design that's been in development for 3 years, he said with genuine admiration. How do you keep doing this? Aaliyah shrugged shyly. I just listen, she said again. Machines tell me what they need, he smiled, shaking his head. You know, most people spend decades learning to think that way. In the days that followed, Aaliyah began to feel something she hadn't in years, belonging. She started sharing her ideas in meetings, working late with Dr. Lin, asking questions about aerodynamics and propulsion theory. Her confidence grew, Not because people told her she was smart, but because she finally believed it herself. Then one evening, as she was leaving the lab, she saw Richard standing by the observation window, looking out at the runway. He seemed deep in thought. "You know," he said when she joined him, "when I was your age, I wanted to build planes too. But life took me somewhere else, boardrooms, deals, meetings." He looked at her. "Watching you reminds me why I started all this. You don't see limits. You just see possibilities." Aaliyah smiled softly. "That's what Mom used to say. The sky doesn't stop where you can't see. It just keeps going." Richard nodded almost wistfully. "She sounds like a wise woman." "She was," Aaliyah said quietly. "She just never got the chance to fly." He turned to her, a thought forming. "Maybe it's time someone did that for her." She looked confused. "What do you mean?" "You've earned it," he said. "Tomorrow morning, be ready. I want you to see what your mind has made possible." The next day, Aaliyah found herself sitting inside the same jet she had fixed weeks earlier, only this time not as an outsider but as a guest. The engines purred beneath her, smoother than ever. She looked out the window as the plane began to move. As it lifted off, the city shrank below. The clouds opened up. And for the first time in her life, Aaliyah was flying. Her chest tightened with emotion, and tears streamed down her face, but she wasn't sad. They were tears of release and of dreams long buried finally taking flight. Richard, sitting across from her, smiled quietly. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Aaliyah nodded, her voice trembling. "It's more than that, sir. It's freedom." And in that moment, at 30,000 feet, the same altitude where the story had begun, Aaliyah wasn't a homeless girl anymore. She wasn't a mystery or a miracle. She was exactly what she was meant to be all along. A creator, a dreamer, an engineer of hope. When the jet touched down again, Aaliyah's life was no longer what it had been a few months ago. The runway lights glowed like stars beneath the darkening sky, and for the first time in her life, she wasn't watching them through a fence. She was stepping off the plane, side by side with the man whose world she had once accidentally entered. Richard Vance had kept his promise. He didn't just give her a chance, and he gave her a future. Word of her talent had spread across industries, engineers, tech investors. Even universities wanted to meet the homeless girl who heard machines. But fame wasn't what Aaliyah cared about. She wanted purpose. She wanted to build back in the city. Richard invited her to dinner at his penthouse, the kind of place that looked like it belonged in a movie. The entire top floor was made of glass, and the view stretched endlessly over the skyline. Aaliyah hesitated before stepping inside. "I'm not sure I belong here," she murmured. Richard gave her a calm smile. "You do now." They sat down at a long dining table, soft music playing in the background. For a moment, Aaliyah was quiet, taking it all in. The silverware, the soft lighting, the aroma of food she hadn't tasted in years. It was overwhelming. "When was the last time you had a proper meal?" Richard asked gently. She thought for a second. "Maybe before Mom passed," she said softly. "After that, I mostly had vending machine stuff or food I could get from shelters." He nodded slowly. "Then tonight you eat like an engineer who just saved my company." They both laughed. And for the first time, the tension between billionaire and homeless girl vanished. They were just two people who had fought their own battles and somehow found themselves on the same side. After dinner, Richard showed her something on his tablet, a digital sketch of a building. Sleek and futuristic. "What's this?" she asked curiously. He looked at her, eyes gleaming. "It's your future." She blinked, confused. "Mine?" "Yes," he said. "We're building a research facility under the Vance Foundation. It'll focus on sustainable aviation and adaptive mechanics, but more importantly, it will be led by people like you, people who never got the chance to show what they can do." Aaliyah stared at him, speechless. "You want me to work there?" "I want you to build it with us," he said. "You'll design, recruit, innovate, whatever you dream of." "This place will be yours to shape," she laughed nervously. "Sir, I don't even have a degree." He smiled. "You have something better. Instinct. Some people study it for years and still never find it. You already have it." The words hit her deeply. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Not her teachers, not the people at the shelters, no one. Her throat tightened as she whispered, "I don't know how to thank you." "You already did," Richard said softly. "The day you fixed that jet, the weeks that followed were a blur of excitement and new beginnings." Aaliyah moved into a small apartment near the foundation, started working with architects, and began designing what would later be called the Aaliyah Innovation Center. She insisted the building have an open-door policy. No formal degree required. Just raw talent and passion. If someone believes they can build something, she told the team, we'll listen. Her first hires were people others had ignored. A young boy who tinkered with broken bikes in an alley, a woman who'd been denied jobs because of her background, and a retired mechanic who loved teaching. The center became a place of second chances. Just like the one she had been given, Richard watched her from afar, proud. Sometimes he'd visit and see her explaining an engine concept to a group of students or staying late sketching new designs on the whiteboard. She's unstoppable, Dr. Lin told him once. You didn't just find a mechanic. You found a movement. But Aaliyah didn't let success change her heart. Every evening after the lab lights dimmed, she'd take a walk to the same hangar where her story began. She'd stand by the chain-link fence, listening to the distant hum of engines. And sometimes she'd whisper to her mother, we did it, Mama. I finally fixed something that mattered. Months later, the day came when the Aaliyah Innovation Center opened. Reporters, engineers, students, and government officials filled the courtyard. Cameras flashed, banners fluttered, and Aaliyah stood on stage. Dressed simply in a white shirt and jeans, the billionaire stood beside her, smiling with pride. When the microphone was handed to her, she hesitated for a moment. Looking out at the sea of faces, then she began, I used to sleep near an airport fence, she said softly. I'd watch the planes take off and wonder how something so heavy could rise. Back then, I thought people were the same. Some were just meant to fly. And some weren't. She paused, her voice steady but emotional. But I was wrong. We all have wings. Sometimes life just makes us forget how to use them. All we need is someone to believe that we can. The crowd went silent, her words cutting deep. This center isn't just about machines, she continued. It's about people. The ones who never got picked. The ones who were told you can't, we'll prove them wrong. One invention at a time, applause thundered through the courtyard. Cameras clicked, reporters shouted her name. But all Aaliyah could think of was her mother's voice, her laughter, and the nights they'd spent fixing broken radios together. After the ceremony, Richard approached her quietly. You did well, he said. She smiled through tears. We did well, he nodded. Do you realize, Aaliyah, that you've gone from a girl fixing a jet in a hangar to someone fixing lives? She laughed softly. I just like fixing things, sir. I guess it's what I was made for. The evening sun glowed against the glass walls of the new center, reflecting her image. No longer a girl lost in the world, but a leader who had found her place in it. As the crowd began to leave, Aaliyah stayed behind for a while, watching the reflection of the sky in the building she helped create. The world was vast and there was still so much to do. But for the first time she knew one thing for sure. She wasn't just a story on the news anymore. She was living proof that brilliance could rise from anywhere, even from the streets and somewhere high above. As a jet cut across the clouds, she whispered with a smile, Fly high, Mama, I'm right behind you.